Welcome back to Lovescape, where every story reveals a truth, and every truth reshapes your heart. Sometimes the deepest scars are the ones nobody sees, the ones that don't show on the surface, but weigh you down every day. Today's story is heavy. It's painful. It's real. It's about a boy who was sold by the one person who was supposed to love him, protect him, and guide him through life. And then, 20 years later, that same person walked back into his life as if nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever happened. And here's the part that will make you hold your breath. When he first saw her again, he didn't reveal who he was. He waited. He wanted to see how far she would go. He wanted to see if her memory was as sharp as the wound she left behind. So take a deep breath, settle in, and listen closely, because what you are about to hear will stir emotions you didn't know you had. Fear, shock, anger, maybe even a little hope. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why some scars can turn into the strongest fuel for a life you never thought you could live. I was 6 years old the day my mother sold me. 6. Most kids that age were learning to ride bikes, playing with friends, pretending to be superheroes, imagining worlds of adventure. But I learned something else that day, something darker. I learned betrayal. I remember every little detail like it happened yesterday. The peeling wallpaper in the small living room, the faint stench of alcohol hanging in the air, cigarette smoke clinging to the curtains, the dim light of a single lamp bouncing off the cheap furniture. I remember the man who counted the money, 5 $100 bills, like he was buying a second-hand bike from a garage sale. And in that moment, I realized I was the item for sale. The last thing I saw before she walked away, without a backward glance, was her face calm, unreadable, almost detached, like she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. That image seared itself into my memory, a silent imprint of fear and confusion that would haunt me for the next 20 years. And even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see her walk out of my life as if she had sold a chair instead of her own child. The years that followed were a blur of chaos, pain, and survival. Foster care was not a home. It was a system designed to handle numbers, not emotions. I was shuffled from house to house, sometimes spending months in a place before being moved again. Never allowed to settle, never allowed to feel safe. I learned quickly that trust was a dangerous thing. I was placed in a house with 5 other children, all carrying their own wounds, all competing for attention, food, and affection that was scarce. We shared everything, our toys, our clothing, even our punishments for things we didn't do. And yes, if you think sharing your sandwich with a roommate is bad, imagine sharing your life with 5 strangers under 10 years old, knowing they could turn on you in a heartbeat. It was chaotic, terrifying, and lonely, very lonely. But in that chaos, I learned to disappear, to become quiet, to retreat inside myself. I learned how to survive by observing, by listening, by staying invisible. I learned how to run when running was the only option, how to hide when hiding was safer, and how to speak only when my words could protect me. Those skills would become my lifeline. And yet, amidst all that darkness, there were glimmers of hope. At 9 years old, I was adopted by a small family who weren't rich or perfect, but they cared. And it wasn't just care, it was attention, love, patience. For the first time, someone asked me what I wanted for dinner and actually remembered my answer. They celebrated my birthday, gave me small gifts, hugged me when I cried. I remember my first birthday cake, how I hesitated before blowing out the candles, unsure if I deserved this happiness. I learned laughter again, but even then, a part of me remained frozen, waiting for the moment she would return, for the wound to reopen, for the memory of betrayal to come alive. That little voice in the back of my mind whispered constantly, "If you ever see her again, you must see the truth. You must see what she really is." And that voice never left me. And yet, amidst all that darkness, there were glimmers of hope. At 9 years old, I was adopted by a small family who weren't rich or perfect, but they cared. And it wasn't just care, it was attention, love, patience. For the first time, someone asked me what I wanted for dinner and actually remembered my answer. They celebrated my birthday, gave me small gifts, hugged me when I cried. I remember my first birthday cake, how I hesitated before blowing out the candles, unsure if I deserved this happiness. I learned laughter again, but even then, a part of me remained frozen, waiting for the moment she would return, for the wound to reopen, for the memory of betrayal to come alive. That little voice in the back of my mind whispered constantly, "If you ever see her again, you must see the truth. You must see what she really is." And that voice never left me. Life has a funny way of reminding you that no one escapes the past. Just when I thought I had buried every memory, shielded every scar, it came back. I remember it was a Tuesday, ordinary, uneventful, perfectly boring. I was in my office, reviewing papers, thinking about lunch, planning the next business move, when my assistant knocked lightly on the door and said, "There's a woman here who says she knows you." I laughed quietly, thinking it was a client trying to pull a prank, someone who recognized me from my public appearances. But then she walked in, and I froze. My heart skipped a beat. My mind refused to process what it saw. And there she was, my mother, not changed much, except the lines life had drawn across her face, the shadow of age and hardship, her eyes, her voice, the way she carried herself, unmistakable. And she said, in a tone that seemed casual, almost rehearsed, almost laughable, "Have we met before?" For a moment, I wanted to burst out laughing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse into rage and grief all at once. How could she say that? How could she act as if the last 20 years, the theft of my childhood, the trauma, the loneliness had never existed? But instead, I stayed calm. I let her talk. I let her words hang in the air, because I wanted to see the truth in her eyes. I wanted her to reveal herself fully, without pretending. And in that silence, I felt something powerful awaken inside me. The realization that after 20 years of pain, I was no longer powerless. That silence, that calm, that control was my weapon. And what I did next would change both of our lives forever. When I heard her words, my first instinct was disbelief. Did she really just say that? Did she really pretend she had no idea about the last 20 years? The woman who had sold me for $500, who had left me to a world that didn't care, was now standing in front of me, asking if we'd met before. For a moment, I considered yelling, throwing the office chair, or storming out. But then I realized something. She needed to see me. She needed to see what her choice had created. And I was going to let her witness it. I invited her to sit down, though every part of me wanted to run. The room smelled faintly of perfume she had probably bought to cover the passage of time, but it couldn't mask the emptiness of her eyes. And as she sat there, talking casually, pretending as if everything was normal, I couldn't help but ask myself, did she think I wouldn't remember? Did she believe I would forgive this? And suddenly I smiled, a small, quiet smile, because now, after 20 years, I had power. Power she never thought I would have. You know, it's funny. The same woman who sold me for $500 now had the audacity to ask for my help. Imagine that. The audacity. I almost offered her a coupon for her trouble. But I didn't. Instead, I listened. And as she spoke, I let her words hang in the air. I let her believe she was in control. I let her think she could manipulate me like she had my childhood. Because that was my strategy. To watch, to wait, and to see her reveal herself fully. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. She mentioned money casually, almost arrogantly, as if it was an innocent request. "I just need a little help," she said. And just like that, everything inside me shifted. I leaned forward, looked her directly in the eyes, and spoke with the calmness of someone who had survived storms she could never imagine. "Do you remember me?" I asked. The room went silent. She blinked, confused, hesitated. And then it hit her. The memory, suppressed or ignored, surged back. And I said the words I had rehearsed in my head for years. The words that would finally close the wound she had caused. "I am the child you sold 20 years ago." The shock on her face was worth every lonely night, every tear, every stolen childhood memory. She stammered. She tried to speak. She tried to excuse herself. She tried to act like it was all a mistake, like it wasn't her choice. But it was too late. I had survived. I had thrived. I had built a life that she could never touch. And in that moment, I realized the most powerful revenge isn't violence. It isn't anger, it's control. It's watching the person who hurt you realize you are no longer theirs to manipulate. The conversation that followed was a mix of pleading, denial, and guilt. She asked me questions about my life, my childhood, my struggles. And I answered each one calmly, almost coldly, revealing just enough to show that I had conquered every obstacle, yet withholding the empathy she had denied me. Every word I spoke was a mirror, reflecting her own failure. Every pause in my voice reminded her that she had chosen money over a child, and that choice had consequences she couldn't undo. And let's be honest, 20 years of therapy, scholarships, businesses, and self-improvement beats 20 years of bad decisions and empty apologies. Just saying the meeting ended. She stood to leave, looking defeated, humiliated, and strangely small. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply walked her to the door and said, "You made your choice. I made mine. I survived. And now so do I." And as she walked away, I realized something profound. The power of revenge isn't in making someone pay. The real power is in becoming someone they can't control. Someone who rises above the pain they caused. Someone who transforms scars into strength. And as I watched her leave, I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. But here's the part that always surprises people. It's not just about revenge. It's about learning, growing, and reclaiming your life. She walked back into my world thinking she could intimidate me, manipulate me, or make me feel small. But the truth is, she reminded me of my own strength. She reminded me that the worst things in life can be turned into fuel for the future. And that, my friends, is a lesson worth remembering. Now, if this story resonates with you, if it inspires you to rise above pain and turn your scars into power, there's another lesson I want to share with you. A lesson about the compounding power of your actions, small decisions, and patience. On our next video, we dive into the power of compounding, not just in finance, but in life itself. How the little steps you take every day can build unstoppable momentum for your future. So click the video on your screen now and let's explore how to turn small actions into massive life change. Because your story, like mine, is far from over. And your power, your revenge, your triumph is just waiting to be written.